Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of Anarchast, your home for anarchy on the internet, coming in from Anarchapulco, Acapulco, Mexico. As you can see, another beautiful day. Just about every single day here is like this.
Seems like that.
And have a great guest, and this is going to be interesting because, well, first of all, let me explain who he is. David Robison. He's hosting the 4th Rational Physics Conference the day after Anarchapulco, so that'll be February 22nd. And just for people to know, all funds, I don't know what you're charging for it, it's like $30 or something?
Yep,
it all goes towards Free Ross, is that right?
That's correct.
So Ross Ulbricht, who's been kidnapped and imprisoned and tortured by the U.S. federal government for starting a website. So past Anarchast guest, of course, Lynn Ulbricht, his mother, so all the funds will go to that. And the reason I find this interesting is because I've had on a number of guests on Anarchast, and some of them got a real response from people who love science. In particular, the Flat Earth episode definitely got some response. But also the episode on NASA and how Jaron of Jaronism thinks pretty much everything they do is fake. And actually, I have to say, I pretty much agree with him from what I've looked into. But at the same time, so we had a lot of people say, oh, these guys are crazy, they don't believe in science or anything. Well, that's not true at all, because you're actually having a physics conference at Anarchapulco. But what's interesting about your physics conference is that it's really got a different take. It's not really the mainstream physics take. So we're going to talk all about that. But the first question I got to ask you, David, before we get started, though, is how did you become an anarchist?
I became an anarchist mainly because of Ron Paul. It all started in 2007 with the Ron Paul revolution. I would always watch political debates, even though I knew they were hokey and fake, and I didn't believe in any of it. And I would always just be amazed at how people take this seriously ever. And I watched the Republican primary expecting the same thing, and all of a sudden, this guy starts talking and just I had no idea who Ron Paul was. Just completely blown away by it. And so I started reading his books, found out about Lew Rockwell, got on lewrockwell.com, started reading Austrian economics, Murray Rothbard and Ludwig von Mises, started learning about the banking cartel and the psychopaths that rule the world. And it probably took about 2 years of just working through it and asking the practical questions: who's going to build the roads, who's going to do this and that, arguing with people on the internet a lot for hours on end. And then eventually I was just like, you know what? I have no excuses left for the state. I think it's manifestly evil in every way. The mass incarceration, the wars, the police abuse, the SWAT raids, it's just evil. And humanity would be so much better off without it. So here I am.
That's great. And you moved down to Acapulco from Illinois before we get into the physics stuff.
Indiana.
Oh, sorry, Indiana. Yeah. So it's quite a bit warmer here. And before we get into all the physics stuff, why don't you just tell us why you came down here?
I came down here in Anarchapulco 2015. And when I came down, I was scared to leave the hotel. I was like, am I supposed to leave the hotel? And the State Department had don't go 2 blocks from the ocean and all this. So I'm then I just walked around and I was like, this is what they're scared of? What? This is so mundane. So I loved it. I love warm weather. I hate winter. And I really, a large part of it was I just wanted to get out of the office environment I was working in. And I knew other anarchists were going to be down here. So I wanted to network with them and meet new people and to have an adventure. I don't know. That's about it.
It's pretty funny. In the last few weeks, I've had 2 people contact us, and they said their wives are really worried about coming to Acapulco. And you've lived here long enough to know that's absolutely ridiculous. But the 2 places they were from, and this is the funny part, is Chicago and from Germany. And so this all happened last 2 weeks. And so I said to the person from Chicago who said his wife was scared to come here, I sent him a headline: in the first 10 days of January, 110 people have been shot and something like 40 or 50 killed, some huge amount in Chicago.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm pretty sure you'll be much safer here from what I can tell. And the other one was from Germany. And it happened right around the time that there was that mass rape event, unfortunately, in Cologne, Germany, where it sounds like literally hundreds of women were raped around New Year's Eve in Cologne, Germany. So I sent him that, and I said, I think you're pretty much safer here. I don't know if anyone got murdered in the last 10 days here. I don't know if anyone got raped. I don't think so. It's possible. It's a fairly big city, but it's pretty funny. People, turn off the TV. Don't listen to the State Department. Yeah. They put that out there for a reason. They don't want people to know how nice the rest of the world is compared to the U.S.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's get into the physics stuff. The science geeks are all out there. They hate me because of the flat Earth episode, and they hate me for the NASA episode. I'm just looking for the truth is what I'm doing, and I'll look anywhere, and I don't believe anything from anybody, especially NASA. But you've got a really interesting take on physics. So tell us all about what this Rational Physics Conference is about and how you got into that.
Okay, well, I've always been interested in physics, and I've always studied it, and growing up and throughout college and high school and everything. But at some point I started to become disillusioned with it. So I'm just like, this does not make any sense. Like, something is not right. So the first thing, actually being on LouRockwell.com, I saw an Electric Universe article. So that was the first thing I got into. But then still I found some things that I couldn't quite grasp. So I kept searching. I actually searched a priori physics one day because I was into Austrian economics, and I was like, what would happen if I searched that? And that eventually led me to Bill Gaedes' website, which has an interesting look to it. But I read the content and it was blown away by it. And I eventually got his book and read his thread theory, and I couldn't believe what I was reading because it just it's amazing. And so in 2014, I went to Salzburg, Austria, because he's been putting on these conferences. He's put on 3 other ones in Europe. So I went and met him and heard some great speakers, and the environment was awesome. We were just all arguing physics the whole time and drinking, and it was a really good time. So I want to recreate that.
I'd need to be drinking if I was going to talk physics. I think the only, I did go to high school, but barely. I just went for the test mostly. But the only class that I truly failed that I even tried at was physics. It just wasn't for me. Although I probably showed up for about 3 classes total. So I just find the whole thing is just way too complex for me. But I'm glad other people are into it.
Yeah, you might like the rational physics take then, because we completely get rid of the mathematics.
Oh, excellent.
It really is like baby physics. That's why I like it too, because it's just physical objects, and that is the subject matter of the study. So I mean, when you criticize relativity and quantum mechanics, people will usually be like, oh, they've been around for 100 years. They've been super well tested. The equations can make super duper accurate predictions, and so on and so forth. And I agree that the equations can make really accurate predictions. So the equations are not in question. It's their physical interpretations that are irrational and make no sense. And so that's what the angle that the rational physics comes at. It's we're gonna target your physical interpretations. And I think people have an idea that the physical interpretation just goes along with the math. Those two go hand in hand. So if the physicist can make a prediction, his interpretation is automatically correct. But I think after looking at all this that they're completely different. And one example of that would be Isaac Newton, when he came up with his law of gravitation, which is his equation for gravity. When he published that, he said that he had absolutely no idea, no physical mechanism for gravity. Yet he had an equation that can make really accurate predictions about gravity. Okay. So it just goes to show you that you don't necessarily have to have an understanding of the underlying mechanism behind why an equation, why that pattern persists, in order to just use empiricism to find that pattern and to encode it into an equation. So just because they can make predictions with equations in no way means that we have to automatically accept their physical interpretations. That's the point. So rational physics is all about the physical interpretations and explanations, not prediction.
That's great. There's so many things like that I found you brought up, it's been around for 100 years, therefore you can't question it at all. This is, every field I find is like that. Economics is a good one. Oh, well, it's Keynesian economics. It's been around for a while. It's like, yeah, so it sucks. And then you look at the medical system. They can create all these chemicals that can treat some symptoms, but are they really fixing the root cause of the problem? You look at almost anything, it's like that. And I always say just question everything and reanalyze everything. And it seems like these institutions, they have this real vested interest in making sure that nothing ever changes. They will fight any sort of new ideas as hard as they can.
Yeah, I mean you go to the university to be a physicist. You're not going to be a dissenter right away. You're not going to make it through the system. And if you want to make it all the way through the PhD, you have to conform to the theories that are already there. And especially if you want to publish anything, you're not going to come in there and publish something that upends or tips the apple cart over. And the people that are in positions of power are naturally, scientists are humans. They want to make sure their work remains important And they're not gonna, if somebody comes in there with a completely different idea, they're not even gonna look at it. And I think in their heads, it's so impossible to them that Einstein or quantum mechanics could ever have anything wrong with it, that it's incomprehensible. So they won't even consider it, just shove it off the desk.
Wasn't it Einstein himself who said that he thinks he's wrong, but he just can't find out why yet, or something along those lines? And then you have these people who say, well, Einstein can't be wrong. It's like, well, he said he's probably wrong.
Yeah, I think towards the end of his life, he really started questioning the mathematical physics and everything. But by that time, he was just like, all right, old man, like, get out of the way. Like, we got quantum mechanics now and everything. But yeah, I think the main problem that they have, relativity, quantum mechanics, and string theory, is that they don't actually use any objects. We get the distinct impression that they're talking about objects. We see the illustrations and the drawings, the animations, but if you inspect each one of these alleged objects individually and ask, like, what actually is that? You'll find that it's actually an abstract mathematical concept. Right. And so they're treating abstract math concepts as if they're real things is the main problem with their physical interpretation. So, for example, if you have a field and you ask a physicist, does a field exist? They'll say, oh, yes, of course a field exists. That's totally unquestionable. Nobody even questions that, right? You just accept it. But then you look for a definition of what actually a field is, and you'll get different conflicting definitions. But basically what you'll end up at is a field is how quantities change with respect to location and time. So if you have like a magnet and you're measuring at different locations, you're going to get different numbers at each location, different readings of the magnetic field. And so all a field is then is just a list of numbers at each location. It's just a description of what you observed. And what they're doing is defining it that way, but then later in their presentation, they treat it as if it's a standalone object that's capable of performing activities and influencing other objects. So they'll say, the field had a vibration, and they'll even illustrate this thing floating there that's doing the vibrating, a physical object with shape vibrating. And you're like, okay, well, is that what a field is, that thing that you've illustrated? And they'll say, no, of course not. You can't take this literally. And so you go, okay, then what's vibrating? And how can it possibly make sense to say an abstract concept is vibrating? That's like saying my love is vibrating or something. It's figurative poetic speech. It's not scientific language. So maybe they mean like the numbers are changing, what you would measure would change, but none of this tells you what's physically interfacing with your measuring device to cause the different readings. So if it's an abstract mathematical concept that they're talking about, like it's an object. And they do this for everything, warped space-time and all that stuff. We get all these illustrations and images, so we get this impression that they're talking about objects that have some kind of shape, but they're not. And when you take away all of these figurative illustrations of abstract concepts, you're left with nothing. This is why it's impossible to understand any of their explanations. Impossible.
That makes a lot of sense to me because I've tried to understand a little bit and it doesn't make any sense. Same with economics, and I've looked into economics enough to know that pretty much what they teach a lot of people in school for the most part is the exact same. It's like, here's a ton of equations. It's like, okay, but what is that really? And it's like, well, it's a ton of equations. It's like, yeah, so? Well, that's how we're going to model the economy. All right, well, are you modeling the economy? Well, we're wrong most of the time, but we've got all the equations here, and it's like, well, get rid of the equations. This is all about human action, and it sounds very similar in that Austrian economics really has no major equations. It's mostly about looking at human action and how it affects the economy. And that makes so much more sense to me than Ben Bernanke with a million scribbles on the chalkboard, and he's just constantly wrong anyway, so I don't know why people listen to them.
Absolutely. I've found a lot of parallels between this approach to physics and Austrian economics. In Austrian economics, you start with the fundamental axiom of human action, and they deduce means and ends and all their definitions. They build up their whole theory prior to even applying it to the evidence. This is the exact same thing. You actually define your terms prior to even looking at any evidence. So, you define an object as that with shape. This is something that you critically reason. And the definition of existence, shape plus location. And you can go on and create this set of definitions which you can then apply to the evidence in order to explain it. So in that sense, it works in the same way, and in my mind, really brings these two different realms closer together and how they're done,
Yeah, it's very interesting. You actually have me interested in physics for the first time in my life, because I think what happens is I look at something and I go, well, it doesn't really make any sense to me, and I just put it aside. I did that with economics, actually. I took economics in college for one class. I went for one class, and they said something like, it was something really stupid, like, oh, the markets always go up or something. And I was like, what? I was like, where's your evidence for that? And they're like, well, look, the U.S. market's gone up. It's like, well, they've been increasing the money supply for 100 years. Obviously in nominal terms it goes up. So I was just like, this is BS. That was just one class economics. So this sounds like very similar with physics. So maybe I'll come to your thing. At first I was like, physics, I'm not really...
There'll be no equations.
Oh, it's very interesting. I know a lot of people are really interested in it. You've had quite a few people sign up, which is great, to help out Free Ross as well. I think Larkin Rose said that he wants to go, which is great.
Right
So a lot of open-minded people looking for real solutions and real knowledge, not just looking at what's been done for decades and just accepting that and not looking any further. One other thing that I got really into a few years ago and actually wrote about at the Dollar Vigilante is the electric universe theory. So again, I'd heard all this stuff from NASA, and I was like, I don't know, who can verify anything that they're saying, and all these photos they put up. It's like paintings. There's no way that's a photo of some galaxy a trillion miles away. It looks like what those guys on the street do with their finger paints. And there's, they have no real pictures of the Earth. They have one from 1973, I believe, or 71, which wasn't even a photo. They said it was a composite, and that was the only time they've really ever had a photo of the Earth. But they can get photos, all this stuff. So I was like, none of this stuff makes any sense. I'm just going to ignore it. But then I came upon the electric universe theory, and I was like, that makes a lot more sense. Like what they're saying, why comets have trails, and they explained a lot of phenomenon that NASA just and other mainstream astronomers say, well, we've got all these calculations, so yeah, just forget about it. And they were just using evidence and saying, no, look, that couldn't happen if what they're saying is true.
Yeah, electric universe was the first thing I got into after, departing away from the mainstream, and I still like looking into their perspectives and hearing what they have to say. They always have an interesting take and an interesting perspective, and they have really, really good criticisms of the mainstream. And that's what really caught my eye when I first started reading about electric universe. But in a fundamentals thing, they still kind of do the same thing that the mainstream does in a way with charge, and they still use fields. So they're still committing the fallacy of reification, and it makes it impossible to really understand at the fundamental level what the theories are saying. So that's why I like this other version, because you can drive all the way down to the fundamental level, which is just an object with shape, and you can't reduce any further than that. You just illustrate it. So it's baby physics. That's why I like it.
Well, I think what it's saying, like usually the simplest answer or simplest solution is usually the correct one.
Yeah.
And I found that over and over in my life. So I think, with economics, I can speak on because I know enough about it, that they just try to make it as complicated as possible so people never want to look into it. And then they say, oh, well, don't worry about it. Let Janet Yellen decide what to do because she knows all these calculations and numbers. And I know that's total BS. And, I think it sounds like pretty much everything else is. So one of the great things about Anarchapulco is it seems like so many people are so open-minded and looking into other ways of looking at things. And it sounds like it makes a lot of sense. So it's going to be an incredibly busy week, so I don't know if I'll be able to make it to your conference, but if I can, I think I will. It sounds very interesting. It sounds like right up my alley. So why don't you let people know anything else you want to talk about, and let people know about the conference as well.
Yeah, did you want to talk about thread theory at all? Or?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, well, thread theory is Bill Gaedes' theory that I came up with, and it starts with what's called the rope hypothesis. And this just blows my mind, okay? It says that, we've had this idea of particles for thousands of years. Democritus, atom, atom goes back to the Greeks, and I'm sure it goes way back before that. And there's been little other configurations like ether, and now we got fields and all this other stuff. But this is like a completely radically new configuration that, to my knowledge, nobody has ever thought of before. And so it says that there are no particles. It says every atom in the universe is connected to every other atom in the universe by these electromagnetic ropes. And so it's like if you took DNA and took the rungs out of the middle and brought those strands together, like twisted around each other, that's what one of these ropes would look like. And so one of these connects every atom in the universe. So an atom is just a convergence of these ropes. So it would look like a little koosh ball if you could hold it in your hand. And as each of these ropes comes towards the atom, one breaks off and wraps around the atom. I'm describing the hydrogen atom. Breaks off and wraps around the atom, and that forms the electron serpentine. So the electron isn't a little bead that zips around. it's like a ball of yarn, a corrugated ball of yarn woven with gazillions and gazillions of threads. And the other thread penetrates to the center, and that forms the proton dandelion. So a proton would look like a sea urchin with spines sticking out in all directions. And so that's and everything's connected. Every atom in my body connected, every atom in your body. You're connected to the Earth. You're connected to the Andromeda Galaxy. Like, I just think aesthetically, it's just a more interesting. But also the physical explanations are much better under that, because now you can finally explain things like attraction. Like, why do things fall to the Earth? Well, because they're connected to the Earth. You can explain light as when the atom pumps, it twists the ends of those ropes and torques them, and that fires a torsion signal down the rope, and that's what light is. It explains magnetism, it explains electricity. It's the first theory, to my knowledge, that never commits the fallacy of reification. So it's always three-dimensional objects, no matter what. It is a grand unified theory of gravity, electricity, light, and magnetism. All four. I don't think that's ever been done, and it has this brand new configuration that I don't think has ever been thought of before. So that's all I want to talk about all day long is thread theory. I'm so excited about it.
Wow. Yeah, no, I've never really heard about this theory, which, that's usually what happens. Some of the real good theories you never hear about because people like, what's his name? The black Freemason idiot scientist guy. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. You mean Neil
deGrasse Tyson? This guy is just a total...
He's a little strange.
Yeah, anyway. They just like to promote, what the mainstream is over and over and keep everyone not thinking and not looking into anything. This theory makes... again, more sense to me. I've always felt and I've always said, I think we're all connected somehow. And a lot of people say that. You hear that all the time. We're all connected. I can't explain how exactly, but it feels that way. So very interesting. So I'll definitely try to check it out.
All right, right on.
So why don't you let people know when it is? And
Sure, yeah. It's on February 22nd, so that's the Monday after Anarchapulco's over. It's the very next day. It's going to be at the Grand Hotel. I don't know what room yet. I guess we'll figure that out. It's going to be in the morning. I actually don't know exactly what time they're starting. Maybe like 9 or so. So yeah, that's when it is.
And it's $30, is that right?
Yeah, $30, and all the proceeds are going to the Free Ross campaign. So even if you hate it, which I highly doubt you will, there's the silver lining there that you can donate money to Ross. So.
That's great. Yeah, there's so many things like that at Acapulco. We're going to have an unschooling, peaceful parenting workshop. I think that's also on the Monday. And Tuesday possibly. And so again, looking outside the box, like maybe we're raising kids wrong. Maybe sending them to government school for 12 years is not the best way to educate a child. The Dollar Vigilante Conference, of course, talks all about Austrian economics, which is, crazy economics, but, it's real economics, and our understanding of why things work the way they do is totally non-mainstream, but we're kicking butt. Most of our predictions have been right for the last year on the markets and Bitcoin and things like that. There's also a direct dating summit with Sasha Daygame, sort of looking outside the box on how you can sort of have relationships. There's even, we're having an entrepreneurship boot camp, and that's another thing that most people don't know anything about. They don't teach that in school either, how to start your own businesses and things like that. And you're kind of you can call yourself an entrepreneur because you're down here working by yourself. You work for a company, but you're a freelancer, essentially an entrepreneur with a small company of one, but living a great life here in Acapulco, Mexico. So come on down, check it all out. Of course, then there's a 3-day Anarchapulco conference with so many great guests. Ken O'Keefe, Walter Block, I could go on and on, Adam Kokesh, Luke Radowski, Zen Gardner, Max Egan, Roger Ver, the Bitcoin Jesus, just on and on. It's going to be an amazing event. Really looking forward to it. And if you're into the physics stuff, which I just got into just now for the first time in my life, I knew they're explaining it wrong in government public indoctrination camp. This sounds a lot more like what I'd be interested in learning about. So we'll have links to all that stuff all down below. So that's in February, about a month away. So forget about school. Just school is, if you're in school for physics, you probably learn more in this conference than in one day. Same thing with the entrepreneurship bootcamp. We say that you probably learn more in one day than you would in 4 years of business administration in college, spending hundreds of thousands of dollars. So that's the way to go. So if you like this video, please like, subscribe, share down below. Please send it to all the people who think I'm a crazy whack job who doesn't believe science. I believe science, but you got to do it right. And I want to see proof and evidence, not what NASA gives us. So that's it for Anarchast, your home for anarchy on the internet. Peace, love, and anarchy.
I definitely learned how to suspend judgment while you look at evidence, like you were talking about, and you got to do that for this flat earth thing, because you think you've got so much evidence and proof and that the earth is a spinning ball.
The best way for me to explain this is to help people to understand when they chose the name Satanism, or at least in the modern world, this religion could be referred to as Satanism. They are taking this trapping, they're taking this imagery from the Christian ideology of Satan.
There is possibility with these psychedelic experiences to shake people out of their slumber. I mean, I know with myself, it has pushed me in a definitely a more clear direction, a more positive direction. It has opened my mind